and work you were doing.
It is. It's very analytical, and I was good at it, but I didn't like it. So I really liked attending births. And so gradually I evolved, and I had Braden in 2000. Sometime after that, I started assisting midwives, and then I became a midwife.
Now with Braden, I mean, you know, you have John there, like, catching the sack. I'm reading this and, you know, and begging for permission. Do I let go? What do I do? You know, give me commands. I mean, you were virtually in command. You know, I mean,
Right.
it was, I mean, you did this well, you weren't living where you are now, I guess.
But we were over near Fort Myer in Arlington,
Right.
so we weren't so far. There weren't many home birth midwives at the time, and mine had to come from out of state.
And this is 2000.
This was in 2000.
God, he's getting old.
Yes, he'll be 10 in August. And
Stephanie's is 4, as I recall.
Right, he'll
Yeah.
be 5 soon.
Right.
So since there were no Northern Virginia home birth midwives at the time, and I knew I had to do this. I had to avoid a cesarean at all costs, not death, but I had to set up everything. I had to do everything right this time to set it up, and I knew if I had a repeat cesarean that it was going to be necessary. It wasn't going to be because I allowed interventions to lead me there. So the midwife was coming from out of state during rush hour on a Tuesday night. So that's why for most of and my labor went pretty fast. It was about 4 hours with Braden.
Fast and loud.
It was fast and loud.
And apparently she did get there in time.
She got there in time. She got there about half an hour before he was born.
And you had a midwife and a doula?
I had a doula. I had a really good friend of mine who was a doula who made it there probably about an hour before my son was born or so. And she was mainly there for me. I mean, we had set this up. We had talked prenatally that we'd have the candles going and the beautiful music, and I'd have a certain top on to birth in. And it just was so fast that all went out the window.
Wow. In the heat of the moment, I suppose. Now, a doula is different than a midwife.
A doula is different. They're supportive of women during birth. They don't do the medical clinical part.
Right. Are they sort of like a birth advocate? Would that be a way to describe it? Or a birth coach?
I guess like a birth coach, you could say, if you wanted to put it in perspective like that. A birth buddy. We call them companions in hypnobirthing, because we know that women can give birth on their own. They could, if they wanted to, go into a closet, go into the bathroom, go out in a field and give birth all by themselves and be fine. Companion is someone that they choose to be with them, whether it's for physical support like massage, whether it's for mental support like just encouragement and this is normal, this is natural, keep going. A doula will do whatever she needs to, but it's not clinical work.
So you sort of had a team there. Then you had your husband, you had your daughter running around watching The Wizard of Oz. You had, which is kind of interesting when you think about it as a commentary. You know, a guest at the Emerald City. Your daughter watching The Wizard of Oz. You had your doula, you had your midwife, and your husband. So it was like a big team. But I guess there's a sexual revolution, not necessarily in sex itself, but a sexual part of that, and a sexual revolution of allowing women to take responsibility for their own bodies in this. Even if it's as late as the year 2000.
And it was going on before then. It just wasn't. It's been easier since we got licensure. CPM's got licensure in Virginia in 2005. So now there's more midwives who've come forth and are willing to practice.
But I mean, it's a long way from thinking you have to open the door for a lady or something like that. You know, in the sense of the taking out the fragile. I mean, neither of you look fragile to me. So.
Yeah, well, it is up to the woman. She is having the baby, so it's better if she does take her power, empower herself, to, rather than, a lot of women don't do that. They just say, I'm going to go to the hospital, I'm going to let the doctor and nurse take care of this
because that's the right, natural, normal thing to do, in their mind.
In our culture.
Maybe we shouldn't use the word natural, but that's the normal thing to do.
I don't know about the word normal, but
Right.
it's common.
Common.
And I think that those women are completely dissociating themselves from their body and the process of labor, and in the end, doing themselves a disservice. Because when you do go through labor naturally, and not only naturally but consciously, there is an empowerment that comes from that, and that really can help a woman in her life and also her relationship with her child.
And I guess what I was leading into in this too is what I'm saying is when you, it is a social political statement to say a woman is in control of her body.
Right.
That you're responsible for your own pleasure, or not, I mean that you can, that you're allowed to have that.
Right.
That you can make choices. Are you going to get pregnant? That you can have a career. That you don't need to be a piece of property. I mean, these are things which, I like to think to our children, they're like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But we've been around long enough to know that that's where we're coming from. And in a sense, this is like one of those last frontiers of breaking away from that.
That's right.
What is the percentage of male obstetricians versus female obstetricians? That's a tough question, and you weren't prepared for that. I'm sorry.
I honestly don't know. Just from
Just by your anecdotal looking around.
75%, do you think?
It seems like there are a lot more men.
Yeah, a lot more men.
And
Because there are more men doctors still, as I recall. That may be changing, but
Well, I think coming out of school, it's different now.
right now, but from the past.
right now, I believe there 51% of medical students are women.
Well, I mean, everything's different now because the
Exactly.
colleges are, right, which is great.
But in terms of obstetricians, a lot of people these days who go into that line do so. There's a joke, and it's not even a joke. I think it's real. The question is, why did you choose obstetrics? And they say, because I like surgery.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking 33% of your births are, that's the number you were using.
Sure.
That's essentially 1 in 3. That's 1/3.
Right.
That's, 1/4 to 1/3, depending on the statistics you use. So you're going to be doing surgery.
That's right.
I just find it odd that something that is so female-oriented, I mean, because I'm there at the start, but, as you're saying, I'm not necessarily to be there at that birth, is so male-dominated in its practice.
Exactly.
It's the male doctors that took birth and brought it to the hospital.
I mean, I don't want to be any men necessarily,
no,
but
not
you're just
at all,
saying,
but
right.
that's the history.
Mhm.
That's the history, and of course, back at that time,
There may have been advantages to it in some ways.
sure, yeah. I mean, there are times when it's good to have the hospital. I'm glad that there are hospitals there for the 10% of women who really need that in their babies. But 90% of women can statistically birth outside the hospital just fine because they're healthy and their babies are healthy. The stats show that really only 10% of women and their babies need to be birthing in the hospital.
And out of that 10, only 3% of all births would normally end up in a C-section.
Right.
Only 3%, and we're looking at 30% across the country.
Which is 10 times greater
Right.
than what you're saying. And when you say normally, you mean medically,
Necessary.
Truly medically necessary, right.
right.
Something that cannot be handled outside the hospital.
Because the doctor I had for my daughter on the second birth said, it's the most dangerous part of life, the beginning of it. And that was a really interesting statement. He was a Vietnam vet who worked as a doctor there, and I guess he came from a different point of view, from how it was. I mean, there is a lot of danger associated with it, I suppose, but
It's been played up a bit.
maybe it has something to do with the, and I don't want to go on too long on this, but maybe it has something to do with the mysteriousness of it to men, because it looks like a painful, traumatic thing. I mean, it is painful. It is traumatic. It is, whether it's normal or not. This is, your body is, that's a big thing coming out. And
It has been shown to be pretty traumatic and painful in the media.
yeah,
But when you get into birthing through natural methods like hypnobirthing, where the women are actually practicing and preparing their bodies to go into a level of relaxation, it's not like that at all. It's much calmer and less traumatic. It's really not traumatic. It's rather enjoyable.
Are most of the women who come to your practice to learn to hypnobirth